I got nightmares in my head, I fear. Thoughts build up until I can't hear. That my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear. The thoughts build up until I can't hear. That my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper.
Hey guys, welcome to day 2 of the Tammy Daybell case. As we were saying yesterday, it's a triple murder trial, and you could make an argument that it could even be 4 murders, even 5 murders, and then even a attempted murder. Come to me. So we are in looks like there's a kind of a sidebar or something going on. Trial hasn't actually started yet. Obviously, we will listen in as soon as it does start. There's Chad, once again, wearing white, right? And I predict that he's going to be wearing white throughout the whole trial, because that's kind of his thing, the white knight, as somebody said. Good to see you guys here. Swedish Mom, good to see you. Elizabeth Jones, the Aristocat. Timmy says hi. Francisca, good to see you as well. Carly is tuning in from England. So it's just gone past 8:30 in Boise. I wonder whether Kat Kruger is in Boise. It's fairly cold, 6 degrees Celsius in Boise today. That's 42 Fahrenheit. I imagine it's a little bit colder than it was, might be a little bit colder than it was yesterday. But does seem to be fairly good weather. Just having a look at this report. Looks like it's going to be a cold week next week. Not quite sure what, I'm not so sure about Fahrenheit. So let's just have a look. Well, 10-0. So some cold weather is still ahead of them. Kat Kruger was telling us yesterday that the temperature in the courtroom was extremely hot. So even the folks in the gallery aren't having a very comfortable time. Similar to us, we kind of suffering out here, dealing with not the best stream we've ever seen. So we'll see whether the sound is better today. Thus far, you can see the camera feed is exactly the same as it was yesterday. I think Kat told us that that the media, I'm not sure if it was East Idaho News or who offered, but they offered to actually give the court cameras, and the court said no. So you can see there's definitely, it's not like maybe there's like a strange vibe. There's real antagonism between the court and the media, which is a shame. It's a shame. I always feel, there are people who say, why are you paying attention to this case and not to that case? I always feel, most of the time, it's better to pay attention to a case than to pay no attention whatsoever. There are a couple of exceptions to that. I don't know whether it was really necessary that any attention was paid to Depp versus Heard. And then the other cases like O.J. Simpson, and other cases where the media does seem to, and the celebrity level of a case does seem to actually have an impact. Is Chelsea here? I haven't seen you. Diana says you can view this trial, but you will suffer. Yeah. There's a song by Desmond and the Tutus, a South African band, that talks about Pretoria girls that they don't play hard to get, but they do make you suffer. It's kind of a similar thing. Lost Loopy, hi from the UK. Swedish Mom says, I have an Alaskan Malamute boy. Swedish Mom, are you actually in Sweden? So I must say I'm really glad that tomorrow there's not a court day, because although I was live for more than 6 hours yesterday, obviously I wasn't talking for 6 hours, but it was certainly a lot of talking, and my voice is actually suffering today. I actually I jumped on the treadmill and my throat really seized up while I was running. Horrible feeling. So if I'm a little bit quieter today, that's part of the reason. Stockholm, okay. With your history, I hope you write a book about this. I might do that eventually, but it certainly wouldn't be soon. Looks like the trial is about to resume. The judge isn't there. You know, what's interesting with the camera angle is and the camera perspective is, even though you can see people in the footage, it's kind of fuzzy. It's not crisp. Seems like that's intentional as well. The gallery looks emptier than yesterday. Like there seems to be a little bit of gaps there, but maybe it's a trick of the light. Who knows? Yeah, Chad is like a statue. He just sits there, really very, very little that seems to be going on. Chad sometimes seems to be the lights are on, but nobody's home. Like, where does he go in his mind? Lynn Lippy, good to see you. There's a comfortable dog. Yeah, Timmy uses me as a
All rise.
and uses me as a blanket. Okay, here we go. Right, are you guys ready for day 2? Do you have your notebooks out?
The jury is present and accounted for.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bailiff. Please be seated. All right, good morning, everyone. We're back on the record on case CR 22-21-1623, State of Idaho versus Chad Guy Daybell. This is the second day of introduction of evidence in the state's case in chief. I'll note the state is here and present. Mr. Wood was conducting examination of a witness. Mr. Wood, is the state ready to proceed this morning?
Yes, sir.
Very well. Also note the defense is present, along with counsel and the defendant. The court also notes the jurors are all properly seated and all 18 jurors have returned. The court's also confirmed that the jurors each completed their affirmation this morning regarding not looking into the case during the break, and so we appreciate you following that admonishment as well. One other matter I just wanted to bring up before we got started with additional evidence is the court's live streaming this hearing in this trial. There is a I heard there were some complaints that the audio maybe wasn't coming through very well on that. I'd asked the attorneys if they could to talk right into the mics. Of course, that helps as well with our court reporter.
Oh, so it
making the
has
record.
filtered through.
In addition, the live stream comes directly through the court's official channel. That can be somewhat difficult to find if you go to the Idaho Supreme Court website. However, there is a website on Ada County about this trial, and if you just Google the term Ada County Daybell trial, there's an easy link to find for the court's official live stream, and that's the most direct signal. So for those that are observing the trial online, if you're having any issues with audio or quality of the signal, perhaps you could go to that direct signal, which is the best source.
It's not the quality of the
the live
signal,
stream
it's the
proceeding.
quality of the,
So with that, then
it's not the quality of the
we
signal.
had Detective Hermosillo was on the stand yesterday, and I believe you're continuing direct examination. Is that correct, Mr. Wood?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, I'll have the witness recalled then if you're ready to proceed with additional testimony.
Thank you.
I must say, I feel differently. I don't know. I like the judge in the Koberger trial. I find this judge very is legally on point. I would just do things in a different way to him. For example, giving the defense a break after the state's opening statements yesterday. They're just things that I would do differently to him. Not saying he's wrong, just that I would do things differently.
Detective
Personally.
Hermosillo was sworn in yesterday. I'll remind you, you are still under oath for your testimony today. And to confirm, not being the state's case agent, I just want to confirm that you didn't review any, well, you're the first witness, so we don't need to do that on this particular witness. So, Mr. Wood, if you'd like to just inquire on further direct, you can do that this time.
All right, thank you. Good morning, Detective. Detective, when we finished off yesterday, we were discussing what you had found or what you had observed at a burial site, and just for purposes of the jury, what site were you at when you found the body you were speaking of yesterday?
We were at the site that we deemed JJ's burial site.
And where, Your Honor, if I could be given State's Exhibit 10A. And if I may publish that?
Yes, it's admitted, correct?
Yes.
So,
Detective, if you could, just for purposes of clarification with a pointer, point out the location you were speaking of.
It's the burial site on the other side of this pond, just underneath this tree.
Yeah. Now, you call it a pond, when you were out there on June 9th, was there water in it?
No, there wasn't.
And again, just to clarify, when we had left off your testimony yesterday, is it correct that what you observed was what appeared to be a small body wrapped up in a black plastic bag?
That's correct.
Your Honor, I'd ask that the witness be handed State's Exhibits 10B through 10M.
I think this is the first time I've ever been in a situation where you've got to source what is being shown in court somewhere else because you can't see it. I think it's the first time I've ever had to do it. Never seen it in anyone else's coverage. So right now I'm looking for an image of the tree in the pond. I mean, I've actually got my own photos that I took, but this is not what I'm looking for. This is the pet cemetery. There are bricks that I think were found lower down. It's actually not clear whether the remains were found here or here, but although this maybe is the burn pit. Just see if I can find that image of the tree. Otherwise, I must revert to my own photos. Often how we think of this case is, dead bodies in the garden, and meanwhile, the person whose garden it is in Hawaii doing this, right?
Detective, can you review those exhibits and let me know when you got a chance to?
So that gives you quite a good idea. This is actually a digital image. It's not a real image. But
Detective, do you recognize
see
exhibits 10B through 10M?
Yes.
the pond in relation to the pet cemetery. You can also see this isn't a
Photograph, just a
pasture.
photograph of
It's basically just a
the west side
neglected
of
patch of
Defendant Daybell's residence
the back property.
and photographs of the backyard.
And do you know when these photographs were taken?
On June 9th, 2020.
Were you the photographer?
No,
But you were on the property that day.
that's correct.
And were you able to observe each of the areas that are photographed in these exhibits?
Yes,
You saw them with your own eyes.
yes,
And are these true and accurate representations of what you observed on June 9th, 2020?
yes.
Your Honor, I move for admission of states exhibits 10B through 10M.
Any objection?
Judge, just to,
Into the microphone, please, Mr. Pryor.
I'm sorry, Judge. Judge, just one here on 10B if I could. Otherwise, I'm fine with the rest of the exhibits.
Okay, so let's do that then. So 10C through 10M have been offered.
So while they're busy with that voir dire, I just want to again just comment on the judge's commentary, where he says there's another feed. Are you telling me that the judge doesn't actually know that the quality of this is subpar? I mean, he's a judge, so he's supposed to be aware of, he's supposed to be a good judge of what the information is. It seems like the judge is basically saying there might be a problem with the signal. That's why it's difficult to see, which is kind of another way of saying, oh, I'm unaware that you finding the image not right or whatever. But I mean, it's basically saying, I'm aware of your complaint. In order to sort it out, do X, Y, Z. And have you ever phoned a call center where you just kind of get passed around and then you eventually you realize there's not really going to be any attempt to solve this. It's kind of cynical. That's the same sort of attitude. It's like, you know, I think an authentic answer would be, we know that you've got problems. Sorry, you know, and you kind of almost wonder why not just ignore the complaint and say nothing about it if you're going to do nothing about it, you know.
Sufficient foundation's been established, so 10B is admitted as well as the others.
Detective, if you will, or Your Honor, may I publish?
Yes.
You can see
Detective, what did you observe in State's Exhibit 10B?
the grave over here
That is
is on the
the
opposite side of the
west
tree
side of
compared
the
to where
Daybell
the neighbors
residence.
would be. So
When I testified earlier to coming out and standing in the lawn area, that's not the vehicle that Mr. Daybell was in, but it was similarly parked that way back in. And that's the driveway he was sitting in when I was observing him look over his right shoulder toward the pond area.
Detective, do you have the pointer with you? Can you point to where you were standing when you initially observed Mr. Daybell's behavior?
I was standing here in this area.
And then you said that you positioned yourself so that you could see what you thought he was looking at.
That's correct.
Where did you go then?
I stood more towards the driveway area. The vehicle that Mr. Daybell was in was up further this way. It wasn't backed in as far as this vehicle in the photograph.
And just to clarify, is that when you looked back and saw the activity under what became the first burial site?
Well, I was looking forward at that time. I was facing this direction. And I aligned myself with Mr. Daybell, who was up here more, and he was looking towards this area here.
Now, can you see the first burial site from where you're from that location?
Yes, it's the tree I spoke about earlier. This is the tree where JJ was buried underneath. This right here is the pond. You can see just a little bit more taller shrubs around the top of the pond area. But this is the tree that JJ was buried underneath.
So is it fair to say that even from the front or the middle of Mr. Daybell's front yard, you can see that location easily?
That's correct.
Detective, what did you observe in State's Exhibit 10C?
so that is court TV's feed. This is the
When I
judge's feed.
testified, I was
You notice any
tasked
difference?
with sifting through the fire pit. This is what we deemed the fire pit. It had burnt tree limbs. There was various little pieces of trash. It was in the middle of round cinder blocks. So that's what we deemed the fire pit as.
And the way it appears in that image, that's the way you found it that day.
Correct. It was that morning, yes.
And what do you observe in State's Exhibit 10D?
This is just north of the driveway that Mr. Daybell was sitting in, looking in the same direction. So we're standing on the west side looking east. And that is the tree. And then here's the pond area right here.
Detective, I'm going to put up State's Exhibit 10A again, and if you can point to the approximate location of where this picture was taken from.
So that last photograph was taken from this area right here.
And so it's fair to say from that location, you can easily see aerial site number one.
Judge, I'm going to object at this point. There's been some leading questions. Continues.
I'll sustain that last question, City.
From that perspective, what were you able to observe?
Burial site, number one, JJ's burial site.
Was it difficult for you to observe it from that location?
The actual grave site on the ground, yes, from that location, but where the tree and the pond are, no, it wasn't difficult.
Detective, what did you observe in State's Exhibit 10E?
So I testified earlier about the difference in length of grass and shrubs in that 6x6 section that was marked off next to the pond. This is what I'm referring to. If you look close, you can see there's smaller grass and dirt protruding right here.
Well, I must say this is
This
irritating.
probably a little bit difficult to see. There's probably a better photograph. But this is longer.
Can't really see
shrubs
these exhibits at all.
Here, and then in here was like the length of sod and some dirt where there was nothing growing.
And when yesterday you testified being called over to burial site 1, is that what it looked like when you got over there?
That's correct.
Detective, can you describe to the jury what you saw in State's Exhibit 10F?
So when I spoke about ERT removing the topsoil and the top level of shrubs, this is what I was speaking about. And you can start to see the three large white rocks I was talking about earlier starting to come through the dirt.
You testified yesterday about a smell. Was this the same time that you began to smell what you described yesterday?
Yes, as soon as they removed this and the topsoil, that's when I instantly can smell the smell of a decomposing body.
Detective, can you tell the jury what you saw in State's Exhibit 10? Or I'm sorry, 10G.
So as the ERT team methodically removed the soil around the white rocks and dug down just a little bit deeper, this is what we saw. You can start to see there was a smaller rock, but the three large white rocks started to show through clearly. When I testify that there was thin wood paneling underneath the white rocks, you can start to see the edge of that piece of wood paneling underneath the rocks. We also noticed that there were roots cut that the ERT team didn't cut. They were already pre-cut. Some of the roots are fairly thick, so that
What
was
is going on?
something we observed as well in that burial site.
Well, it looks like there's a sidebar, but it also looks like the audio's out of sync.
Describe to the jury what you saw in State's Exhibit 10H.
After the ERT team removed the white rocks, this is the two pieces of wood paneling that were underneath.
Sure, I feel like I missed that. What is that sidebar
What did
all
you
about?
observe in State's Exhibit 10I?
Wait, what is going on? Just a second.
I spoke earlier about the distinction in soil. Some of the soil looked wet or moist, some of it looked dry. Excuse me. What you're looking at here is once we remove the wood paneling, this is what was underneath, and you can start to see the distinction through here of the wet soil. And up here is just the dry soil. So the rocks and the paneling were all through here. So that was the other thing that we observed. And as we took the paneling off, the odor began to become a lot stronger. So we knew we were at the right spot.
Your Honor, I apologize for any delay. I wonder if we just have a very brief sidebar regarding the removal.
Well, I must say the quality from the judge's feed is slightly better, but it's like 5% better. It's certainly not significantly better. I can't really believe that this is what we're talking about on day 2 of this trial, is the fact that we can't actually see what's going on. I mean, it's... I would imagine over time that people in the judge's orbit, relatives, because you can imagine that they might be interested in this case as well, so you can imagine that he would just be deaf to people that he doesn't know. But I do think you're going to have other people complaining, and it's got to reach him, and it's going to get worse and worse.
Mr. Wood, you can continue.
Thank you. Detective, can you explain to the jury what you observed in State's Exhibit 10J?
So once we started removing the wet soil, and I testified earlier to a black round object protruding through the dirt, this is what we started to see. It appeared to be like tight wrapped black plastic. It wasn't very too far underneath. It's fairly shallow, but that's what we started to see. And I talked about what appeared to be a crown of a human head.
I tend to agree with that. You push him too much and he'll simply just deny media access.
Can you describe what you saw in State's Exhibit 10K?
So once that appeared, the ERT team leader Steve Daniels used a small, sharp instrument. And I testified that he made a slit through the black plastic. And you can see the black plastic kind of peeled away on the top of the head. And then I testified there was a white piece of plastic underneath. And this is the white piece of plastic here. He made a slit in the white plastic. And when he did that, you can see what appeared to be brown human hair. Some of the hair kind of came out with the sharp instrument, and that's the hair you can see on top of the white plastic. But that's what you're looking at there.
Can you tell the jury what you observed in State's Exhibit 10L?
Once the ERT team continued excavating. They removed all the soil on top of this small body that was wrapped in completely black plastic. I testified that it appeared to take the shape of a small body in black plastic. And this is what we saw here. It's probably a 4x2 grave, and I'm guessing at those measurements. But it started to take the shape of a small body, and then it had different pieces of duct tape throughout the black plastic on top.
When did you observe in State's Exhibit 10M?
Once we lifted JJ out of the ground, there was still wet soil underneath where he was laying. And that's body decomposition. The body had begun to break down. So that's what the wet soil is through here. Again, you can see the roots that were cut to be able to put him in this location.
A witness just glanced towards Chad Daybell there. Quite interesting. I can definitely understand not wanting to show images of human remains, but you don't do that by turning the
Detective,
whole
once
broadcast
that body was
into
recovered,
sort of fuzz.
what did you do? And to clarify that question, once that body was taken out of the ground, what did you do?
I assisted the coroner and a few other officers in placing JJ in a body bag, black body bag. Coroner locked the body bag for evidence. We then put it in the back of the coroner's vehicle. The coroner and a Fremont County deputy drove the vehicle up to the morgue, and myself and Lieutenant Rockwell followed behind that vehicle. Once we were at the morgue, JJ was placed in the morgue, and then we returned back to the Daybell residence.
Do you recall who the Fremont County coroner was?
Brenda died.
And do you recall what other officers traveled with you to the hospital?
In my vehicle was just Lieutenant Ron Ball. With the coroner, Brenda Dye, I believe it was Detective Kaiserman.
And just for clarification, you had said this already, and I apologize, but what hospital did you take him to?
Madison Memorial Hospital
And where is that located?
in the city of Rexburg.
Once you finished that task, what was the next step for your investigation?
We returned back to the Daybell residence. As we got there, we were told that they had possibly
Judge, I'm going to object at this point. There's some hearsay.
I'll ask another question. Without telling the jury what anyone told you, what did you do when you got back to the residence?
we assisted in a second burial site.
And when you got back to the residence, did you observe another burial site being looked at?
I did.
Where was that located?
So through the course of our investigation, we learned that the Daybell family had deemed a section of the backyard as what they refer to as a pet cemetery. And we knew through talking to family members that the pet cemetery had a little black dog statue next to a post that kind of signified where the pet cemetery was. And so when I returned back from dropping JJ off at the morgue, I observed ERT digging in the pet cemetery area.
And did you aid in that excavation?
I did.
What did you personally do?
ERT began taking off top layers of soil in this specific area in the pet cemetery. Once they began to again see wet soil start to protrude through the dry soil, they slowed down, and we got on our hands and knees and began excavating that by hand.
And by hand, did you use tools to do that?
We did. They had small tools that we could use, trowels, like paintbrushes, things of that nature.
Approximately what time of day was this?
Say it was afternoon.
And approximately how many people were there with you using hand tools?
There was only a few of us at a time that could work because of the area, but also because of the smell. We had to take turns digging because we were on our hands and knees, and the smell was so bad that you could only work for a few minutes before somebody else had to take turns, get on their hands and knees and start digging by hand.
And you said the smell, what did it smell like?
Decomposing body.
How long did you aid in that excavation using the hand tools?
Hours. Probably.
And did you find anything?
We did. We ended up digging down and started to uncover burnt pieces of flesh, charred bone, fatty tissue. Just, and I apologize for the lack of better words, but globs of burnt flesh starting to protrude through the dirt.
And once you found that, how long did you keep working that site that day?
We worked probably until probably 4-ish in the afternoon.
And you mentioned ERT. Were they working there alongside you?
They were. There was also other areas being excavated as well, the fire pit still. So everybody was kind of tasked with something different at that point. And once we started getting down a little bit more in Tylee's burial site, we assumed it was Tylee, we could start to see the top of what appeared to be something plastic and green. And at that point, the ERT team leader, Steve Daniels, decided we were done for the evening.
When you were done for the evening, what happened?
We had Fremont County Sheriff's Office, the Madison County Fire Department, bringing 2 large light trucks to illuminate the crime scene. The crime scene was taped off. We had officers from Rexburg City Police, deputies from Fremont County Sheriff's Office that remained on scene all night long, walking the perimeter to make sure that the scene wasn't compromised. And it was well illuminated.
And did you return the next day?
Yes, we did.
And when you returned the next day, who else returned?
Everybody that was there the previous day.
So ERT came back
That's correct, yes.
and other members of the FBI,
Yes,
Fremont County officers.
yes.
for expert police officers. And I believe you testified earlier that there were some attorney general investigators there as well.
Yes,
And they were all there that second day.
that's correct.
Approximately what time did you arrive that second day?
We started fairly early. It was approximately 7 in the morning.
And what did you start doing when you got there on the second day?
I went back to Tylee's burial site. We had put up canopies to keep sunlight and wind. There was media, helicopters flying overhead, so we wanted to keep the scene from being compromised as much as we possibly could. And at that point, we got back down on our hands and knees and began digging again with those same little tools to get down to see what exactly we were going to take out, figure out at that point.
And so and then what happened next? Did you continue to do that work?
Like I said, we would take turns digging because the smell was so bad. And we would just keep excavating slowly around this green object that started to come through the dirt the first day. So it started to take a shape, a roundish shape, when we began digging down and methodically removing dirt. And at that point, we could start to see what appeared to be the shape of a green melted bucket that appeared to have the remains of, we assume, were Tylee that were charred and burned inside it.
And were you there for the excavation of that bucket?
Yes.
How did that happen?
Once we got down to what we thought was the bottom of the disformed bucket, we observed part of a human skull underneath the bucket. There was some teeth that we ended up excavating from underneath. At that point, the goal was to lift that out of the ground. And so there was we made kind of a little hole around it to try to get underneath. So we put tarps out. Like I said, the goal was to try to lift it completely out without manipulating it in any way. But when we tried to do that, when we lifted it, it all broke apart because there was nothing holding it together. So at that point, we had to go back in and remove all the pieces of the charred flesh, and burnt bone, and organs and pieces of Tylee that put onto the tarp.
And while you were doing that, you talked about smelling. Is that still present?
Yes, very much so. Strong odor, yes.
Were you able to observe the lack of a better word, total removal of that green bucket and its contents from that excavation site?
We were able to lift everything out at that point. We put it on the blue tarp. There were photographs taken, measurements taken by ERT. Once that was completed, we dug down even further to make sure we didn't miss anything. Once we figured out everything was out of the ground, that tarp and those and Tylee's remains were then put into a body bag. In the coroner again locked the body bag for evidence purposes. And Tylee was also transported.
And did you follow along when Tyler was transferred to the morgue like you did in JJ?
We did, we followed in the same manner. Myself and Lieutenant Ball. Once Tyler was placed in the morgue, we returned back to the Daybell residence.
Your Honor, I'm going to be asked that the witness be handed State's Exhibits 11A through 11G.
So this particular image really gives you a good perspective. You can see there's actually two driveways. There's a driveway
Judge, for the
coming.
record, I've previously
in there.
reviewed these and I would object to admission of these as exhibits.
All right, exhibits 11A through 11G are admitted without objection.
There's also
This
a
time,
driveway
as
coming
we
around
do
the
this
side.
evidence, I'm gonna announce that because of the graphic nature of some of this evidence, I'm not going to be showing this on the court's live stream, nor to the general public in the courtroom. The jurors will be viewing the evidence as well as the parties are permitted to see that. In addition, the court will provide an opportunity for any victims that wish to see the evidence in a private setting to view it as it's now been admitted into the record. We made arrangements to not display this to the general public. And so, Mr. Wood, with these exhibits, that's how we'll proceed. And we will not include that on the live stream, but you can discuss it on the record and open public with witness.
So they're going to just cut the feed to the witness box, or are they going to cut the whole feed?
Can you review that exhibit, those exhibits?
Anyway, in this particular perspective, this is where JJ was
Your Honor, I
buried
understand
on
that
the
there are
side
evidence to
away
ask
from the
you
tree.
additional questions just to
But yeah, you get a good idea of the neighboring property, certainly on this
Detective,
side.
what do those, what does State's Exhibit 11 and 14 and its subparts?
Photograph of Pet Cemetery and photographs of Tylee as we took her out of the ground in her burial site.
And were these photographs taken on June 9 and 10?
That's correct, yes.
And were you on the scene that day when those photographs were taken?
Yes,
Are they true and accurate representations of what you saw?
yes.
Your Honor, those exhibits having been admitted, I'd ask to publish.
When I was at the property, it actually looked just like dirt, like there was nothing growing there. Just really looked like a field of dirt.
Detective, before I publish
The
that, I'm going
area
to
where the burial
place the
site was.
exhibit up again. And can you
Chelsea, Terry, good to see
point to
both
the
of you
general
here.
location of what you've described as the pet cemetery?
Right here.
So can you have on the record and explain where it's pointing?
Yes, Detective, will you explain where you're pointing?
It's just east of this shop area and just north of the fire pit. So it's right through here.
And Your Honor, I do think that the state's first picture under State's Exhibit 11 is okay for public consumption.
It is. I just wanted to make sure our system was working as well, but exhibit 11A is fine.
Detective, what did you observe in State's Exhibit 11A?
This is where we began excavating briefly. As you can see in this photograph, there's a small black dog statue next to the post. So that's where we had learned this was the pet cemetery area through talking with family members. And then there's just some tarps laid out for some of the soil. You can see in the back the markers that had been distinguished and laid out by ERT for the fire pit area that I had talked about earlier.
And Your Honor, I think at this point it's appropriate to turn to public access.
I agree.
Detective, Your Honor, I'm at a bit of a, I have no idea if this is, I can't see if this, well, I'll ask, Detective, can you see that image in your monitor?
Yes,
Can you see most of it?
yes.
Can you describe for the jury what's been marked as State's Exhibit 11B? What did you observe there?
Can I see? Is there a way I can use the pointer?
I have a suggestion also, Mr. Wood, just because I understand what you're doing to try to line that up since you can't see the monitor. Do you want to set a notepad or something on there, and get it oriented, and you could set on top of that just so that it's lined up?
And if I could have the screen for 1 moment, thank you, Your Honor, for that suggestion.
Not quite sure what's going on now.
Detective, what did you observe in State's Exhibit 11B?
It's hard to describe without the pointer, but I'll do my best. In the middle of that photograph, you can start to see the different color and changes in the soil from dry to a wet, moist dirt. You start to see to the left just a little bit of that area. You can see the white piece sticking out and it's burnt on top, and that's charred bone that's starting to stick out, and all the little pieces next to it are pieces of burnt flesh, tissue, where we later determined were organs that were all kind of, that's the top of what was inside the bucket. So that's what we first started to see when we started to excavate.
And at this point, were you still using the hand tools?
Yes.
You explain for the jury what you observed in State's Exhibit 11C.
So as we started to excavate down further, some of the top of the mass of burnt flesh wasn't really attached to anything. And so when we would start to dig away towards the sides, it would kind of come apart. It wasn't part of that original mass. And so what you're looking at on this blue tarp is burnt flesh still attached to some bone. The upper left part of that section that you're looking at is part of the hip bone that still has burnt flesh attached to it. And then dirt and yeah, just fatty burn tissue.
You described to the jury what you observed in State's Exhibit 11D.
So when I talked about it started to take a roundish shape, this is what I'm referring to. And we dug around the sides of it, trying to get to the bottom, because like I said, the goal was to get underneath, have 3 or 4 guys in there and just lift it onto the tarp. So that's what you're looking at in this photograph is just the
Hey, come.
burnt flesh. It's still just kind of inside that.
And Judge, could we approach for a sidebar, please?
Yes.
Okay, so while they on the sidebar, can you see this view of the property? Yeah, you get quite a good idea of line of sight of the neighboring properties. Note that there no property is really this way. As I said, I've driven here, not really this way either, not much over here. So this side of the property, there's really not much, right? The properties that would be of concern are really this one, and that one. So basically these 3, and to some extent that one over there. In fact, I guess you could argue that this property could possibly see right up to what's going on here. And of course, JJ's grave was on the other side of this tree. You can't quite make out. There is a tree here. Maybe I should do it full screen. There is a tree over here, and the grave was on the other side. At this point in the photo, you can't actually see any kind of excavation going on. You can see the grave here is just out of line of sight from this building, out of line of sight of that building, and partially obscured by everything here from that house and this house. So, I mean, I'm going to state the obvious, but you can see it would be ridiculous to have the burial site here to just be too open and too obvious. The other thing that's quite interesting is there are 2 driveways to access this property. The one is over here, and the other one is over here. And so if you wanted to bring a body to the property from elsewhere, with the idea of bringing it either here from the driveway, here or there, which driveway would you use? I guess it depends. In some instances, I suppose you could say driving up here and parking sort of where this tree is would get you behind the house, and then you would be relatively closer to this area. This driveway here, as far as I know, doesn't get you any further than there. So you would use this driveway. This driveway is also, to some extent, less visible than this driveway. For example, if you're coming down this road. To be honest, I didn't even know there was this driveway, even though I went by it.
The bottom.
Detective, what you explain for the jury what you observed in State's Exhibit 11.
So once we removed that mass, and put it on the blue tarp, there was still some wet soil underneath. So we dug down even further to make sure that we had excavated everything we needed. So what you're looking at, you can see the tarps in the background we had put up. You can see some of the hand tools that we used just to the right of that hole. But that's what you're looking at, is just after we got that mass out, the wet soil.
Detective, what did you observe in States Exhibit 11G?
So these were part of Tylee that kind of broke apart when we tried to lift it out of the ground. There's pieces of charred bone, there's parts of a skull on the bottom left, covered in dirt, and they're still burnt, rotting flesh still attached to the bone. So that's what you're looking at, that one. These are the pieces that broke off.
If I was in court with that, I'd be in trouble.
Detective, I believe you testified that you assisted in transferring those remains to Madison County, to the hospital, correct?
Correct, I followed behind in the corner.
Was Lieutenant Ball with you again?
He was.
Once you got up to the hospital, what did you do?
We observed the Fremont County coroner, Brenda Dye, transfer Tylee's remains into the morgue. The morgue was unlocked, but there was evidence they put up. And at that point, myself and Lieutenant Ball went back to defendant Daybell's residence.
And what did you do when you got back there?
We assisted and made sure there were no other burial sites or anything that the ERT team needed assistance with. At that point, we decided that we were going to take JJ and Tylee to the Ada County Coroner's Office to have an autopsy performed. So roughly 4 in the afternoon on June 10th, 2020, it was decided that we were going to follow the county coroner with the remains of JJ and Tylee to the Ada County Coroner's Office for an autopsy the next morning.
And when did you arrive in Ada County, approximately?
Approximately 8 or 9 in the evening on June 10th.
And what did you do once you got there?
We went directly to the coroner's office, and JJ and Tylee were dropped off, and the coroner's office took custody of both JJ and Tylee.
So that was later in the evening.
Correct.
And was an autopsy performed that night?
No.
When was the autopsy?
The
Judge, I'm gonna object. There needs to be some foundation.
Overruled, if you know, you can answer.
The autopsy was performed June 11th, early morning hours.
Well, that was the next day.
Correct.
And were you present for that?
Yes, I was.
And where did that autopsy take place?
At the Ada County Coroner's Office.
So when you arrived at the coroner's office, what did you do first?
Initially, when we arrived, we had a little debrief with the medical examiner, Garth Warren. He told us what he expected.
Judge, objection.
Grounds.
Hearsay?
Same.
You met with Dr. Ward.
Correct.
What was the purpose of that meeting?
To debrief us on what to expect that one.
What did you do next?
We went to the room where the autopsy was performed. Put the sanitary booties on our shoes, signed in on a whiteboard with our name and cell phone numbers. So he had a record of everybody that was in the room. And at that point, we stood back against the wall and observed the autopsy.
Now, as a detective, you don't think one or not, correct?
Correct.
But you were able to see it take place.
That's correct.
And what did you observe happening during that autopsy?
One of his team members brought out the body bag. And I recognized it to be the same body bag that we took from defendant Daybell's backyard that day because it still had dirt on it. It still had the same lock. And at that point, they opened the body bag and revealed the same black plastic and small body that appeared to be in the black plastic.
And then what did you observe?
Dr. Warren and his team cut down the middle of the black plastic to open up what was inside. At that time, I observed a small child with duct tape on his head from his chin to his forehead area, tightly wrapped around his head. He had red pajama pants on, red pajama shirt.
Red pajamas still on.
He had his arms folded this way across his body. And there was duct tape from elbow all the way around to his other elbow. He had his ankles also bound with duct tape. He was still wearing his nighttime pull-up diaper. He had black socks with the word Skechers in orange. I
So
could tell that
his
he
socks on.
was going through various states of decomposition.
It
based
seems
on his
like
skin color.
JJ was murdered
Judge, I'm gonna
at
object.
night
Grounds.
when he was in his pajamas,
Experience to
perhaps
determination about the levels of decomposition.
in his bed or bedroom.
Sustain the objection and expect the final part of the answer about the decomposition as to what you want.
All right. Detective, what did the body's skin look like?
The skin was sloughing. It appeared to be bluish green, black, yellow. And through my training experience, going through and handling different dead bodies at different stages of decomposition, that's what I read.
Judge, I'm going to object again. There's been no foundation for him to make that sort of medical assessment. He's not a medical doctor.
Your Honor, my argument would be that's not a medical assessment. It makes it on his training experience.
I'll overrule the objection. Like the
Another
prosecutor,
objection
you have
overruled.
chances prior
You can
to
see why
overrule
he wouldn't want
played in the
that sort of
response.
testimony to be heard. It's
Detective,
not
once-
nice to hear. It's
once
doesn't
this
reflect well on his client,
body was
does it?
taken out of the bag and you made the observations that you just described. What happened next?
Dr. Warren and his team then cut the white plastic that was wrapped around his head and duct tape. They cut down the middle to reveal what was underneath. And at that point, I observed another piece of duct tape stretched from JJ's jawline to jawline over his mouth, He also cut the several layers of duct tape from his arms, and it revealed some more duct tape that had his wrist bound underneath all those layers of duct tape. He then took his bottom pajamas off and shirt, and it also revealed the nighttime pull-up diaper he was still wearing.
Now, Detective, you spoke about the duct tape and bag over.
Similar to Kaylee Anthony.
Correct.
Correct.
And you've been referring to this as JJ.
Yes.
Until that duct tape and bag were removed, though, were you able to identify him as JJ?
No, once they removed the duct tape in the bag, through looking at all the photographs for the last 8 months of JJ, I recognized him to be the same little boy laying on that table as JJ Vallow. He had the same hairstyle, shorter on the sides, longer on top. At that point, I recognized him as JJ.
Once the clothing was removed, what did you observe happened next?
Dr. Warren pointed out some bruising on his arms, on his ankles, on his chest. He also pointed out some scratch marks on the left side of his neck, just under the duct tape. At that point, Dr. Warren and his team performed the autopsy.
Your Honor, I'd ask that the witness be shown on State's Exhibits 12A through 12E.
A through B.
E.
B, thank you.
Now, when I've sat in court and you see autopsy photos, you feel angry. You feel immediately, obviously shocked. I know when I was in the Mo Wilson murder trial, I mean, you tend to see things that you don't see every day in the media, and what you feel right beside those feelings of shock is anger. I mean, there's quite a few emotions you feel. You're seeing in a moment kind of what has happened to the victim, but in quite a explicit way. Like in a moment, you suddenly realize just how a life has been wiped out. And what comes with that feeling is anger, and then you can't help looking at the defendant in anger. That's, I think, what's happening right now. That's the unspoken thoughts, I guess, of some of the jury members already.
State's Exhibits 12A through E.
Yes,
What do they purport to be?
JJ Vallow laying on the table after they opened the black plastic.
And were you present when those pictures were taken?
Yes,
You were in the same room.
Right.
Are those true and accurate representations of what you observed that day?
yes.
Your Honor, I'd ask that State's Exhibits 12A through E entered into evidence.
No objection, Judge.
Very well. 12A through E are admitted. All of these are graphic in nature, will not be published or shown.
Do you notice Larry is in court
Courtroom will be published.
while these images are being published? Previously, he wasn't. So, I mean, I imagine he has seen them
Can you
before,
describe for
and
the
now
jury
it's
what you observed in
seeing
State's
them
Exhibits
again.
12A?
But previously, he wouldn't be present for this sort of thing. It looks like Kay is there as well.
Once they removed the black plastic, that JJ Valla was in, this is the first thing we saw. You can see on the white plastic on top of his head, that's the slit that was made when his head was sticking out of the ground. You can see the duct tape I testified to wrapped around his entire face. His red pajamas are still soaked with body decomposition. The level of duct tape on his arms is what really caught my attention. And he still has a white and blue child blanket wrapped around him.
So Tylee was shot from what the evidence
Can you
seems to
describe
show.
the jury what you observed?
That doesn't seem to be the case with JJ.
This is the JJ's legs, his bottom half, he has his red pajama pants on still. His ankles, like I testified, are wrapped with duct tape. Those are his black Skechers socks that he had on. It's hard to see there too, but his legs and body are also soaked with decompositions.
Can you describe to the jury what you saw in instances of the 12C?
When I spoke earlier that Dr. Warren cut down the white plastic and the duct tape that was covering his head, this is what we saw. You can see the other layer of duct tape around his mouth that went from jawline to jawline. You can see his hair, brown hair still was matted down to his head, wet, soaked with body decomposition. But at that point, I was able to still recognize him as JJ Valla.
No, I don't think they were both shot. There was definitely a different approach
12D.
with the second child.
That's the white bag that was covering his head. That looks like blood in the bag. It's actually body decomposition, just breaking down. It appeared to be a normal trash bag. It had a red drawstring. And you can see, if you look close at the waffle style pattern, the expandable type trash bag. There's still pieces of duct tape that are attached. That's what that photograph depicts.
Can you describe to the jury what you saw in 12B?
That's just
Investigator
another
seems quite
photo of
emotional.
JJ. The tape is starting to lose its stickiness because of the way the body is. It's just a different photo or a different angle of JJ's face.
I seem to remember when these images were shown in court during Laurie Vallo's trial, she didn't look at them. Chad doesn't seem to have a problem looking at them. Like I would like to ask Kat Kruger, for confirmation, does Chad look at the monitor? But it does seem as though he does. Whereas with Laurie, you could clearly see that she would avert her view. She would, I think, just look down, but she certainly didn't seem to look at the monitors. Chad seems to be okay looking at them. And if you think about it, Laurie's not a grave digger, Chad is. And the title of this video is, Did Chad Dig His Own Graves? it's a little bit of a play on this whole idea of digging your own grave.
Normal, but we are going to take a mid-morning recess at this time. We'll reconvene here about, quietly before 10:30 to get started with additional testimony.
All rise, please.
Okay, so we in recess. That is kind of a question that we'd like to know is, did Chad dig both of these graves? And the answer is not necessarily yes. He may have dug just one of them. I suppose you could say both, but Tylee Ryan's grave was very different. There's like a much smaller set of human remains to kind of get rid of. The grave of JJ was really a grave. Like it was really quite a lot of effort was put in to dig the hole to create stability of the hole and so on. So my personal opinion is that Chad dug the second grave. In the case of the first grave, it's harder to say, but I'm simply saying that the second grave really is a grave. The first one is kind of it's a smaller amount of human remains that are placed in the ground. Still a grave, but it's not a conventional grave. The remains of Tylee were more akin in a way to a cremation gone wrong. So it was like a cremation gone wrong, and then the remains of the cremation then being disposed of. That's why I said it's not technically a grave. It's kind of a semi-grave, right? Did Chad dig that? It seems like he may have, but bear in mind, Alex was on the property for more than 2 hours. And so one wonders whether Alex made a balls up and then Chad took over, or whether they worked together and both made a balls up. One just wonders sort of what happened. Anyway, I'm going to take a break. I'll see you guys in about half an hour. I'm not sure if I'm going to be here for the afternoon session. Just I've got kind of some work to do in terms of the Manda Knox case. So just letting you guys know. Anyway, thanks, guys. See you guys in about half an hour. Okay, well, we're still in recess, but have a look at this. This actually comes from Boise. I, in fact, I actually think I was given this outside the courtroom by Kat Kruger. It's a stuffed, what's a toy cow, and it makes a cow noise. And guess who really likes this? Come. Hey. So, Kat, I'm not sure if you're watching this, but if you are, this is your toy did make it here, and Timmy and I really did enjoy playing with it. So, all the way from Boise. How's that? You can see he does like it. Timmy, can I take it away? Timmy, do you want it? Can I take it? Do you want it? Hmm? I'm gonna, Timmy, I'm gonna put it somewhere else. Then you can get off my lap, right? Okay. So Timmy, here. See what he does. See, he likes it. He likes it. Okay. Okay. Well, court should be resuming any minute now. It's
Thank you. Please be seated.
32 minutes past. So there we go.
Counsel, if you're ready, we'll have the jurors brought back in.
I do recommend using earbuds. I guess we're waiting for the jury to arrive. Just to reiterate, I'm not going to be doing the afternoon session. So I'll just be here for the next hour or so. On the docket for this channel, I am working on further statement analysis of the Amanda Knox 4-page letter. I hope you guys have watched that. If you haven't, I'm going to probably be doing 3 or 4 or 5 deeper and deeper and deeper dives through that letter. And who knows, I might even take it further than that. So yeah, the Amanda Knox case is being heard right now as well in Florence. The I don't want to say suspect in the Madeleine McCann case, but certainly the Christian Bruckner has been on trial for quite a while in Germany, but that trial has actually now been postponed. So otherwise, that trial I think would have been going on now as well.
All rise.
Okay. So the prosecutor was taking his witness through the autopsy, and we haven't yet heard very much about the injuries, but I guess we're going to hear what the
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Please be seated.
what the coroner assessed the cause of death to be.
We're back on the record then on case CR 22-21-1623, just included the morning recess. Detective Hermosillo is still under oath. And Mr. Wood, if you'd like to continue with your direct, you can do that at this time. Thank you.
Detective, I think when we left off, we were speaking about the autopsy of J.J. Bell, correct?
Correct.
You had mentioned earlier that you did observe the actual, not only the body, but then the autopsy of J.J. Bell.
That's correct.
And were you present for that entire autopsy?
Yes, I was.
And when that autopsy was concluded, what did you do?
At that time, Dr. Warren and his team removed JJ from that autopsy table. Then they brought out a second, excuse me, black body bag. And I recognized it to be the same body bag from the scene because it also had dirt. And they placed that body bag on the table.
And what did you observe next?
Dr. Warren and his team opened the body bag, looked at the remains for what was left as far as remains inside. He stated there was nothing he could do at that time with an autopsy, so.
Judge, I'm going to move to strike as hearsay,
Your own statement already came through.
and I'm going to move to strike.
So,
Could you repeat the question?
What did you observe? What were you had just talked about the Ty's remains being brought out. What did you observe?
Once the remains were brought out, Dr. Warren opened the bag and looked at the remains and stated there was nothing he could do at that point. So at that time, we left the autopsy room for the day.
And when you left, did you do anything in furtherance of your investigation that day?
No,
Did you return to the Ada County Coroner's office the next day?
we did. On June 12th, 2020, we went back to the Ada County Coroner's office. At that point, Lieutenant Ball took custody of some of the evidence and we transported it to the state lab in Meridian.
And were you with Lieutenant Ball when you did that?
I was, yes.
And once you took it to the state lab, what did you do?
Those items were checked into the state lab. And then that concluded what we did for that day.
Detective, you spoke earlier about some of the other agencies you've worked with in this investigation. And is it correct you worked with Fremont County?
Correct, yes.
And I believe you testified that your primary focus in this investigation was looking for Tyler and JJ. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's it.
Was there an investigation in Fremont County at the same time that had connections to your investigation?
Yes, there was.
What was that investigation?
Fremont was investigating the death of Tammy Daybell, who was married to the defendant, Chad Daybell. Kind of the exact same time we were doing our investigation with missing children.
And would you meet with Fremont County and discuss the cases together?
Yes, we would.
And would you aid each other in those investigations?
Yes,
Would you share information?
yes.
Detective, are you aware of any event involving Tammy Daybell on October 9th, 2019?
Yes, I am.
How did you become aware of that event?
Through the course of sharing information.
Okay, so I hope I've muted the audio from the court, I just want to make a few comments. Tammy was asphyxiated, JJ was asphyxiated, and their deaths are quite close to one another. One also wonders whether Tammy may have been asphyxiated with a plastic bag. As far as I'm concerned, I'm not sure if I accept this as the plastic bags as the murder weapon. Just because you find the victim with plastic bags over them doesn't mean that's how they were killed. I don't know whether the decomposition would have made it impossible to see bruising. I think it would be. But if you think about it, it's the same argument I had with the Tammy Daybell situation, which is it's difficult to strangle someone manually or even put a plastic bag over them without them making a noise. And David Warwick and Melanie Gibb were in the house around about the time or in the apartment when JJ was murdered. So that would suggest he was killed in a way that he couldn't make a sound. So I don't know if I accept just putting a plastic bag over his head and duct tape. It's possible, but I think whatever sound he would make would need to be muffled in some way. That's hard to do. I suppose you could use a pillow. Another possibility again is using a sedative. Of course, I don't think a sedative would come up in toxicology after 9 months. So all I'm saying is I personally don't think it's 100% that he was killed using plastic bags. I think it's certainly a viable theory, but I think there's the other alternatives as well. If you did just put a plastic bag over his head, he would be able to scream, he would be able to struggle, he would be audible for certainly an unacceptable period of time. That's kind of my point.
Share information and receive information from Fremont County.
It was important because the suspects in that case were the exact same suspects in our case. And so we wanted to make sure that we shared information so nothing was missed. At that point, we were still looking for 2 small children. And so it was imperative to us that we shared information and gathered information from neighboring counties and anybody that.
It's also interesting in this case that you have a situation where people are suffocated, the breath is squeezed out of them, and meanwhile you have, in another sense, breath breathed into an alternate reality, life woven into a fictional reality. It's quite interesting, that trade-off, air and breath and life and light taken from some people and kind of literally used to inflate essentially the egos of other people and to blow life into like a balloon of someone else's fairy tale, right? That's really what's going on here. It's quite ironic.
And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe you testified that you were looking for that Jeep because it was requested by Arizona law enforcement.
That's correct, yes.
And are you aware of why they were looking for that Jeep?
Yes, and
Why were they looking for that Jeep?
that Jeep was a suspect in an attempted homicide of Brendan Boudreaux, who was married to Lori's niece, Melanie Boudreaux. The suspect in that homicide was also Alex Cox.
Who was driving that vehicle, one wonders.
Detective, going back to October 9th, 2019, Tammy Daybell, are you aware of the incident that took place with Tammy Daybell?
Yes, I am.
What was it?
Judge, I'm going to object. There's no foundation as to how he became aware of it.
Sustained.
Through your investigation, did you become aware of what happened to Tammy Daybell?
Yes, I did.
And how did you become aware of that information?
Sharing information with Fremont County.
And so was this part of the collective knowledge of the case that you were working?
That's correct, yes.
And did you aid in that investigation as well?
I did.
So you personally became aware of these events?
Correct.
Based on your knowledge and your investigation, are you aware of any event involving Tammy Daybell on October 9th, 2018?
Judge, again, there hasn't been proper foundation.
I think at this point I've established that it's through investigation.
This objection is overruled.
You can answer the question.
Yes, I'm aware.
And what was that event?
On October 9th, 2019, Tammy Daybell believes that she was shot at in the driveway of the defendant Daybell's residence.
And when you say shot at, are you aware of how she thought she was shot at?
She initially reported that it was possibly a paintball gun.
Detective, in your investigation, did you ever put together timelines of events that took place?
Yes, I did.
Why is it important to do that?
Just to establish who the key figures were and the key dates to aid in our investigation, so we can make sure that
It's a classic pillar of an
we share
investigation is a
accurate and correct
timeline.
information to the other agency.
And in preparing for this trial, did you prepare any charts of key figures to aid the jury in understanding your testimony and the testimony of the trial?
Yes, I did.
And was that based on your involvement in the case
Yes,
and your investigation?
correct.
And based on I'm sorry, that wasn't very well said. Based on the information you gained from your investigation.
That's correct.
Your Honor, I'd ask that the witness be handed State's Exhibit 30.
So now it looks like we're going to go through the timeline. I might provide some timeline notes in the chat as well.
Detective, do you have State's Exhibit 30 in your hand?
Yes, I do.
What does it purport to be?
Those are the key figures that I put together as far as the investigation goes, photographs.
And did you do that to aid this jury in understanding who the people involved in this case are?
Yes,
And did you do that in anticipation of your testimony?
yes, I did.
And are those, the pictures attached with those names, are those true and accurate representations of the individuals attached to those names?
Yes, they are.
Your Honor, for demonstrative purposes only, the state would move to enter State's Exhibit 30 into evidence.
Any objection?
For demonstrative purposes, no.
Very well. Exhibit 30 is entered for that reason.
May I publish?
Yes.
Detective, if you can just use your pointer and just, for purposes of the record, read the names attached to each picture.
Sure. This is Lori Vallow Daybell. Charles Vallow, Alex Cox, who was Lori's brother, Chad Daybell, Tammy Daybell, his deceased wife, Tylee Ryan, who is daughter to Lori, JJ Vallow, who's a son to Lori, and Melanie Pulowski Boudreaux, she was remarried, is the niece to Lori Vallow.
Now, when you say that JJ was Lori Daybell's son, was he also Charles Vallow's son?
Yes, he was.
And that was by way of adoption, correct?
That's correct.
And so Alex Cox was JJ and Tylee's uncle.
Yes.
Detective, similar to that last chart, did you prepare a
Hi, Elizabeth.
timeline in anticipation of your testimony?
Yes, I did.
And did you do that based on your experience and knowledge of the case?
Yes, I did.
And it was based on information you gained through your investigation?
That's correct.
And did you do that to aid the jurors in understanding just the basic timeline of the events that happened in this case?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'd ask the witness be handed State's Exhibit 31.
Judge, could we approach please with the sidebar?
Yes.
Okay, so while they're having the sidebar, I'm going to take you guys through this really good timeline provided by abc4.com. I'll put a link in chat. It's a really good source just for the timeline. So Charles and Lori adopted Joshua J.J. Vallow, the biological grandson of Charles's sister Kay Woodcock and her husband Larry Woodcock. J.J. had autism, and Lori's attorney said his biological parents could not take care of him. So that in itself is quite an interesting backstory. Lori and Charles agreed to adopt him. A condition of the adoption was that the Woodcocks remain in JJ's life. Within a month of the adoption, the Woodcocks moved to Arizona because they had a hard time being away from him. Sometime in 2014, so the Woodcocks moved to Arizona to be closer to JJ. And guess what happens? The Vallows moved to Kauai, Hawaii, where they operated a small business on the island. The Woodcocks said they visited JJ less frequently but maintained contact through the phone and FaceTime. The Vallows moved back to Arizona, and Kay said that she recalled Tylee being a good sister to JJ. Just a reminder of who we are talking about. I must say, I can't think of it's hard to think of a more horrible fate than what happened to these two young children. Now, 2015, Chad and Tammy moved to Salem, Idaho. So we're looking at the timeline of Chad in a way alongside to Lori's, right? Then if we go on, at some point before Lori and Chad met, Lori began reading his religious book. So that's quite important to stress, is that before they even met, Lori was reading, in a way, being hypnotized by Chad's vision. And that shows you, in a sense, that Chad's agency, certainly in terms of his psychology, in terms of his writing, in terms of that side of his influence, it was actually Chad's agency that got the better, if you like, of Laurie. His books were focused on radical theories of spirituality about the end of the world, right? So, to be blunt, his books were about the apocalypse. And then the death started, April 3rd, 2018. If you think about it, all the deaths that happened occurred between 2018 and 2019. Also, the attempted murders. So the first death, April 3rd, 2018, Tylee's father, Joseph Ryan, died and it was ruled a heart attack. Guess what? Tammy's death was also initially ruled a potential heart attack. Alex Cox's death has been ruled some sort of cardiovascular incident. Good to hear, Elizabeth. So bear in mind, Joseph Ryan dies after Laurie starts reading Chad's books, right? Now we go into the fall of 2018. Laurie and Melanie Pawlowski begin attending meetings not sponsored by the church, but and their spouses don't attend. Melanie, Laurie's niece, became more focused on the idea that the world is going to end soon. Brandon said that Melanie Pawlowski was not very religious when they first married, but she got very passionate about going to church and certain ideas at church. This is all in the fall of 2018. October 26, 2018, Laurie and Chad meet at a religious conference in St. George. One does wonder, were they communicating, how can I put it, via email, via phone calls, and I think that makes sense that they were in touch in that way. Looks like the sidebar, wow, is still continuing. Okay. Laurie's friend Melanie Gibb reported that they were flirty. Remember, Laurie was still married, I think, at this point. Chad was certainly married. And they talked about a lot of religious beliefs they shared. They used those beliefs to justify killing Tammy, JJ, and
This
Tylee.
time, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, there's an evidentiary issue to resolve, which we are going to take up outside of the presence of the jury. We'll do that as quickly as we can. So I will be out the bench while I research this momentarily. Then we'll come back on and make a ruling outside of the jury's presence, bring them back in to evidence.
All rise, please.
Well, if yesterday was slow, today is definitely slower. At the conference, Chad reportedly told Laurie they had been married in a previous life, and Laurie said she believed it. So you can see how Laurie is drinking the Kool-Aid, but of course Chad is providing the Kool-Aid. Now we go to October 28, 2018. Laurie created a contact for Chad labeled Bishop Shumway. This was the first electronic evidence of their interactions. Okay. Now we go from October to November 2018. Chad reportedly came to Arizona for another conference. Bear in mind, I think Laurie was living in Arizona now. So Laurie's in Arizona, Chad goes to Arizona. Chad lives in Idaho, Laurie moves to Idaho, just a kind of a abbreviation of the whole story. So Chad goes to Arizona in November 2018. Bear in mind, by this time the following year, there would be another four or so deaths: JJ, Tylee, Tammy, and Alex Cox, and Charles. According to Melanie, Chad stayed at Laurie's house on November 2018. Chad actually stays with Laurie. because Charles was out of town. Again, they were married still at this point. Melanie said that she believed it was a hookup, meaning they likely consummated their relationship. That weekend, Laurie told Gibb that she and Chad were sealed together by Moroni and Jesus Christ in the LDS temple, and their relationship of multiple lives was reunited. December 5th, 2018, Chad and Laurie made their first appearance together on the Preparing a People podcast, Time to Warrior Up. The podcast has since been removed. That particular podcast that episode has been removed and disassociated. They've disassociated themselves from Chad and Laurie. Wonder whether we can find that podcast, Time to Warrior Up. December 25th, Christmas 2018. Brandon said it was the last Christmas his family spent with Charles and Laurie, and that he said everything felt different. Brandon said the relationships were not very close, and other people were there, including Melanie Gibb and her family. So there's already trouble in paradise. Laurie is in love with someone else, and she's starting to show it. Okay. Laurie also told Melanie that she had a dream that Charles was in a car accident and would not be home by January 1st, 2019. But then Charles wasn't in an accident, and when Gibb asked Laurie what happened, she said he didn't because Satan interfered with the plan. I seem to remember that Chad also dreamt something similar with Tammy, that she was in some kind of accident before she died. Now 2019. January 2019, Charles texted Brandon and told him that Laurie was accusing him of infidelity. And so, what are we dealing with here? We're dealing with, what do you call it? Reverse, accuse. What's that strategy for a defense? Reverse accusation. How does it go again? Reverse accusation. Deflect. I'm just trying to think. It came up in the Depp versus Heard case. Darvo, that's the one I'm looking for. Darvo. Right, and Darvo is, there you see it, deny, attack, reverse victim and offender. So Laurie is very good at that. We heard her doing that when the, what do you call it, the police did the welfare check. She basically, the same thing she was doing, she was saying her life is in danger. She's got to keep moving the kids, because she was basically doing that. Okay, so let's continue. Laurie said that her friend Melanie Gibb, Laurie told Melanie Gibb that Charles was taken over by an evil spirit. She said that they're going to need to perform castings to get it out of him, right? So Charles has got an evil spirit, but then over the next couple of months, Charles would be taken over by 3 or 4 different evil spirits, and they would need to cast out. And this really set the precedent for all the other victims. They get evil spirits and need to be cast out. They can't cast them out, and then they die. Laurie later started referring to people who had spirits in them as zombies. January 31st, 2019, body cam footage from Arizona police showed Charles begging Laurie to receive mental health. So, it wasn't just something that was happening kind of in the background. If you were with this person, if you were with Laurie, she was literally turning into a different person. And Charles was starting to feel desperate. He felt that she was struggling with her mental health, right? And Charles was right. Charles seeing red flags was absolutely right to see them. Charles also called the police, but they didn't believe him. Even after he was murdered, they didn't believe him until they did believe him. Chad searched Ned Schneider, Louisiana obituary in 1997. Ned was the name Chad and Laurie gave to one of the demons that they said was possessing Charles. Now, notice how the timeline sort of kicks up. February 2019, Charles files for divorce from Laurie. I mean, Laurie is the one having the affair, but Charles files for divorce. Well, it's not going to be enough. He will eventually be killed by Laurie's brother. He claimed that she viewed herself as a god preparing for the second coming of Christ. You might think that sounds far-fetched, and I think people did think it was far-fetched. What do you think of that today? If people only believed Charles in February 2019, his life could have been saved, the kids' lives could have been saved, Tammy's life could have been saved, Alex's life could have been saved. Charles claimed that his wife would kill him if he got in the way of her performing her mission. He later halted divorce proceedings and told Laurie he wanted to make the marriage work. Laurie and Chad were often in contact, even though they were married at the time. How's that for prediction? Charles claimed that his wife would kill him if he got in the way of her performing her mission. We've kind of just dealt with the same thing in the John Barnett case where he said, if I die, I didn't take my own life, and then he has died. Laurie and Chad were frequently in contact during this period. Now we deal with February to March 2019. Charles contacted JJ's grandmother, Kay, because Laurie left and he didn't know where they went. This is a kind of a precursor to what would happen when JJ disappeared. So this was the first kind of disappearance of JJ. This time he's still alive, though. Kay often took care of JJ while Laurie was missing because Charles needed to work. Kay and JJ moved back and forth between Arizona and Louisiana. Kay said that she helped Charles with his business in February because he was distraught over his separation from Laurie. As a result of this, as a result of Charles being emotionally compromised and Kay helping him, Charles spoke to her about naming her as a beneficiary on his $1 million life insurance policy. Charles then named Kay the sole beneficiary and removed Laurie from it. I don't think Laurie knew that, though. Laurie wasn't aware of that. Charles and JJ eventually moved to Houston, Texas, because it was closer to Kay's home in Louisiana. According to Kay Woodcock, Laurie left her husband and child for a total of 58 days during this period, 2 months. It was later discovered that Laurie was in Hawaii. She never reached out to JJ, never reached out to Charles. Do you see how there's another precursor here? She goes to Hawaii, she leaves her child, and we heard in court what she was doing in Hawaii. She was also trying to convince other women to leave their families, and she was basically just gradually gaining in influence. In that time, she never reached out to JJ. She never reached out to Charles. March 2019, a joint bank account between Laurie and her brother Cox was used to purchase a round trip for Chad from Idaho Falls to Mesa, Arizona, that's south of Phoenix. So here you can see how Alex Cox is also sort of involved. And all of this is expensive while paying for an air ticket for somebody else. Didn't Chad have enough money to buy an air ticket? March 3rd, 2019, Chad searched on the internet for June 26 star sign, which is Laurie's birth date, and are Cancer and Leo compatible. Now think about what that says about what Chad really believes and Chad's real faith. Pretty ordinary, pretty everyday. April 2019, Laurie moves to Texas to live with Charles and JJ. Charles halts the divorce proceedings and tells his family he wants to make it work between him and Laurie. You've got to wonder what is really going on there. Why did she really go to Texas? Maybe it was to get hold of JJ. Because on May 5th, 2019, what's Chad doing? He's searching for malachite and eBay malachite jewelry on the internet. He's basically thinking about how to buy Laurie a wedding ring. So Laurie going to Charles, there's something else, there's some other ulterior motive going on there. Well, this is a really long thing that's going on in court now. Okay. May 7th, 2019, Laurie searched the internet for malachite as well. Later, Laurie and Chad's wedding bands appear to be made of malachite. Okay, just to be clear, I'm sourcing this information from an excellent article, abc4.com. I've already put the link in the chat. I'll put it in again in a moment. Then May 17, JJ visited the Woodcocks in Louisiana for the weekend, and they celebrated his birthday. This was the last time the Woodcocks saw JJ in person. Okay, May 29, Laurie and Zulima Pastenes have a conversation about Charles' demons. June 1st, Chad searched Hiplos on the internet, which is the name Chad and Laurie gave to a demon that was allegedly possessing Charles. June 2019, Laurie and Charles moved to Chandler, Arizona. This is like the end stretch of their lives together. Laurie reportedly told Melanie Gibb that Tylee was dark sometime between February and June 2019. Laurie's niece, Melanie Pawlowski, and her husband, Brandon, decided to get a divorce. Brandon claimed Melanie affiliated herself with similar beliefs as Laurie and joined a cult. Melanie also allegedly told Brandon that she received revelation from God that she wasn't safe at the house with him, and used this argument against him in court for establishing visitation rights. July 1st, 2019, Charles told Laurie he was going to Idaho to talk to Tammy Daybell about Laurie and Chad's affair after weeks of confronting Laurie about it. So you can see how that would be alarming to Chad and also to Laurie. Charles wants to deal with the situation. Charles is aware of what's kind of going on. He wants to confront Tammy, tell Tammy, and bear in mind if he told Tammy and communicated to Tammy and Tammy had listened to him and believed him, Tammy's life could also have been saved. So there were so many opportunities in this case for lives to be saved if people just listened to one another. July 9th, Chad searched the internet for when you surprise someone with accusations. Reminds me a little bit of the sort of searches Chris Watts did. Okay. July 11th, 2019. 2 days after the search, when you surprise someone with accusations, Laurie's brother Alex Cox shot and killed Laurie's husband Charles. He claimed it was in self-defense. It was later declared a homicide. Cox was designated as Laurie's protector by Chad in a patriarchal blessing. So I think there are at least two people who were shot and killed in this case. Charles and Tylee. And I think there were two people who were asphyxiated in this case. Tammy and JJ, and possibly sedatives were used as well. Okay. July 12th, 2019, Chad placed a call to Valley of the Sun Mortuary in Arizona following Charles's death. Chad asked about the pricing for a cremation. He gave Charles's name as John Daybell, spelled D-A-B-A-L. He wouldn't give his phone number. He said that he wanted the remains for family in Louisiana. Well, Charles's family is from Louisiana. So you kind of get the feeling that Chad was in charge. Think about this. You kind of get the feeling that Chad was in charge of the cremation of Charles. Again, think about the agency in terms of that. I mean, if anything, either Charles's family should be responsible for that or Laurie's. So here you've got someone wanting to confront Tammy about her husband having an affair, and that husband eventually deals with the cremation of the murdered accuser. Hi, Blue Flame. Good to see you. Well, whatever's going on in court is taking a while. July 13 to 14, about $3,000 was sent to Valley of the Sun Mortuary. Okay. Now Chad sent Laurie multiple texts in what investigators called a romance novel. So Chad basically told Laurie a story via sending her a lot of texts. Like the texts were basically a storyline. At this point, Chad is still married to Tammy, and he told Laurie that she was his best friend on earth and throughout eternity. Also, that he would see her in a minute as he was going to bed. Chad described in detail a romantic relationship between James and Alina, which are the names he used to substitute for himself, and Laurie. Chad texted Laurie about his children's upcoming BYU graduations. And Chad said in a text, I feel like she will be gone by then. Who do you think he's talking about? But I still have the hoopla to deal with it. I will still have the hoopla to deal with it. So I believe that's why the Lord is making me wait. Chad also texted Laurie, I need so badly to just gently kiss you for hours. It would likely lead to other activities. And then Chad responded, Laurie responded, likely or luckily? She's implying it would luckily lead to other activities. Okay, Chad said it would likely lead to nakedness. This is just one example of many of these sorts of texts between them. Now, this is the kind of thing they're sending to one another while they are talking about respective spouses becoming zombies and perhaps needing to die. July 18, 2019, Laurie found out that Charles had not been named as the beneficiary. That had been a big shock. So guess what Laurie did when she found that out? She actually tried to fake, I think she tried to fake a signature. Melanie Gibb asked Laurie why Alex had spent the night, why Alex had spent the night with her, not with her, but in the same house when Charles was killed. Laurie told her it was because she believed Charles was going to kill her for her $1 million life policy. Remember, I mentioned Darvo a minute ago. So Melanie wants to know why was Alex at your home with Charles? And she says, well, because she had $1 million life policy and Charles wanted to kill her for that. Deny attack, reverse victim and offender. Deflect responsibility. Basically, you just invert the whole thing. You make the whole thing the opposite of what it is. Okay. Melanie also asked Laurie why she didn't just get a divorce from Charles, and she said, well, it wasn't in the Lord's plan, and that if Chad got a divorce from Tammy, he would be penalized and lose his exaltation or standing with God. So it's like, if you think about that kind of in both ways, why didn't Laurie and Chad just divorce both of their spouses? It's quite a simple answer. If they divorced their spouse would know that I don't love you anymore, and they would direct inheritance money elsewhere. So it was important to stay married so that they could kill the person and then inherit their share, right? And incidentally, I feel that may be a potential scenario in the Suzanne Morphew case. Why Suzanne Morphew was in an affair, but Barry didn't want them to get divorced. Barry may have also been having affairs or in relationships as well. Suzanne certainly thought that was the case. Why couldn't Suzanne not be allowed to divorce Barry? Well, because then Barry couldn't inherit money. And so if you murder someone and nobody knows that you murdered them, then you inherit that money. And so that's kind of what's going on here. I can't divorce you because I need to murder you so I can get money. I need to turn your blood and straw into gold. I need to turn, you know what I'm saying? I'm simply saying in the Suzanne Morphew case, it's a potential scenario the prosecution might use in that case. Certainly is a scenario that looks like it's playing out in this one. So when Laurie says, it wasn't God's plan for Chad to get divorced, really, was it God's plan to murder Tammy? It's a kind of sick psychology, isn't it? July 20, 2019, a purchase was made on Laurie's credit card to pay for an Allegiant Airlines flight for Chad to go from Provo to Arizona. You can see at this point, Laurie is paying for Chad, which shows Laurie has a certain amount of agency, certainly in terms of finances, that Chad doesn't have. But they want to do something about that. July 22nd, 2019, Chad and Laurie text each other about Kauai and the plan. Chad told Laurie, "Love you," and she responded, "I love you." Chad then replied, "Not as much as I love you." Laurie told Chad that he will love the scenery in Kauai as it's very similar to Hawaii. Chad responded, "Hopefully we can be there soon." This is in July 2019. July 2019, Laurie organized a casting for Brandon because he was dark and had an evil spirit. Laurie told her niece, Melanie, that Boudreaux was part of Hitler's group and considered a very high dark. Okay, next one. August 10 to October 24, Alex Cox purchased 46 guns. So suddenly things ratchet up a notch. So Alex seemed to know that things are about to go into high gear. In basically a month, he buys 46 guns. Where did they get the money for that? August 10th, 2019, Kay Woodcock said the last conversation she had with JJ was on this day. JJ would be deceased about a month later. Kay also said that this FaceTime was very different. JJ didn't have a device in his hand. It seemed like someone was holding it for him. Kay also said that it was a very short call. When she tried to contact him over the next few months, she never got any response from Laurie. I'm quite exhausted just doing all of this talking. Okay, August 12, Laurie removed Tylee and JJ from her $2 million life insurance policy so that her oldest son, Colby, was the only beneficiary. You can just see how all of this is woven together. Sex, money, religion, guns. August 14, Laurie submitted a rental application for a townhouse in Rexburg and listed her income as the amount of combined Social Security benefits for herself, JJ, and Tylee. Tylee should have been receiving her own benefits, and Laurie was supposed to use JJ's benefits for him.
Thank you. Please be seated.
Okay, looks like we're back.
All right, we are back on the record on CR 2221-1623. We are going to take up an objection outside of the presence of the jury as it relates to the state's proposed exhibit, in this case, particularly state's proposed exhibit 31. And the court had to go back and review some prior rulings in the case that occurred some time ago. I've done that now, so what I'd like to go through is the proffer and determination if there's still a objection to the exhibit and make a ruling on that outside of the jury's presence. So Mr. Wood has offered exhibit 31, which is a timeline, and Mr. Pryor, does the defense maintain an objection to the admission of that timeline?
Judge, I spoke with Ms. Blake.
I spoke with Ms. Blake, and procedurally, I think at the time that the 404B was filed by the state, we were also dealing with the severance issue, is what I recall. And then she discussed that with me. So I think I may have made a non-objection to the 404B. And I think I made a record of that when Mr. Thomas and Mr. Archibald were objecting to that. So I may forego my.
It does look like
objection because I
JJ's
think,
grandparents are there.
My recollection is I don't have a record of it, Judge, which is a little unusual, but I think I may have noted on the record to the court that I'm not objecting to the introduction of the 404B evidence.
All right, I understand. I think there was lodged an objection back February 14th of 2023 by you to the 404B motion. Does the state have any clarification on that, Mr. Wood?
Your Honor, just based on recollection, I believe it was not an objection to all of the state's intended 404B, but to some of it. And my recollection, and I'm not looking at any document, this is just my recollection, was that the defendant did stipulate to some of the 404B, including issues dealing with Charles Fallow and Brandon Boudreaux. That's my recollection.
And Judge, my recollection is that I did file a timely objection, but then at the hearing, there was, and I'm going back, Judge, and we're talking 3 years ago, and I'm just going off of recollection as well, as Mr. Wood is. I believe that I filed an objection, and then at the time of the hearing, I may have orally stated that I'm not objecting to the introduction of the Brandon Boudreaux or the Charles Fallow information, and Mr. Thomas and Mr. Archibald continued theirs, and the hearing was continued on, and somewhere in the interim, Judge, there was a severance order granted, and I don't know whether I was part of the 404B motion. That's where I'm having some difficulty in recollection, and my records don't show an order that you granted the 404B in this case, so I don't see an order in this case.
Okay, so just to clarify, there was an objection was filed on behalf of Mr. Daybell by Mr. Pryor, February 14th, 2023 to the 404B. We then had a hearing on the 404B evidence on February 22nd, 2023. The court then issued an oral ruling on the record, and in that oral ruling went through different evidence that was sought to be proffered under 404B. And among the rulings the court made on the court minutes under paragraph 9, specifically referencing consideration of the shooting at Mr. Boudreaux, the court weighed out the 404B arguments and found that it would be admissible at trial. And then in the hearing, I did indicate that I'd gone through the analysis for 404B, looking at.
Okay, well, it looks like it's continuing still, just those sort of discussions. So I think we're going to continue with the timeline. We, in August 20, the direct deposits for Tylee's Social Security payments from her father's death were moved into a newly created joint account for Laurie and Tylee. So, if you have any doubts about premeditation, there you have it. You can see also just how clearly this is money is a very big part of this crime. Sex is a big part of this crime. Power is a big part of this crime. Religion is a big part of this crime. I wonder whether, I think I'm going to put up a poll asking which aspect do you think is the biggest? I think it's a really interesting question. Which aspect between money, sex, power, and religion is the biggest aspect in this case? Let's see if I can put it up in a poll. To me, whoa, don't kick my keyboard. Okay, here we go. how do we phrase this? Which aspect would you say has the greatest influence on this case? Religion, sex, money, or power? I think a good way of thinking about this is think of those in both, relating to both Chad and Laurie, not just one of them. So you might want to do this poll on paper in terms of Laurie, do it on paper in terms of Chad, and then do it on paper in terms of them as a couple. I mean, if you think about it, there's no doubt that religion has a big part to play. There's no doubt that sex has a big part to play. But why is murder necessary? Well, it would seem to be the money aspect and then also the power aspect. So at the moment, just been a few votes, money is so far way ahead of everything else. I'm surprised again that religion, no one has voted for religion. Because if you think about it, what did it start off as? Well, Chad having some kind of religious experience, and then Laurie having it through Chad's books. Seems like money and power are drawing neck and neck. Still not a single vote for religion. Looks like the jury are back. A couple of votes now for religion. To be honest, I don't know what the answer is here. I think the answer might be what a lot of what this poll shows to some extent. At the moment, money by far the most, people 60%. But if you think about it, why was Charles murdered? Well, wasn't it for the insurance? Why was Tylee murdered? Wasn't it for the Social Security? Why was JJ Social Security? Tammy for the insurance? So money is, I think, a very good answer there. What did the people in this case want or need? Well, they did want and need power. What were the underlying driving forces that perhaps addled minds, not just the minds of these people, but others' minds? Sex and religion. Okay.
Other than for which the defendant is on trial, such evidence, if believed, is not to be considered by you to prove the defendant's character or that the defendant has a disposition to commit crimes. Rather, such evidence may be considered by you only for the limited purpose.
So Earth says, I voted religion as that was the beginning of this horror show. Religion is undoubtedly an important part, but I think one's got to ask, did Chad genuinely believe in the rubbish that he was peddling to everyone else? Did Laurie genuinely believe? Well, if Chad and Laurie weren't lying to people about what they were doing, you could say they were. So religion was really just a device used to manipulate other people, right? What is the real thing that the religion was serving? Money, right? The religion was actually in service to money. The power trip. So another way of thinking about it is, why did they want money? Well, for power, for agency, to be able to do what they wanted to do.
If you can take your pointer and go through these events and just read them into the record.
July 11th, 2019, Charles Bellow dies. September 2nd through September 3rd, 2019. Lori, Alex, and the kids, JJ and Tally, moved to Rexburg, Idaho. The last known proof of life for Tylee was September 8th, 2019. The last known proof of life for JJ was September 22nd, 2019. The attempted shooting at Brent and Boudreaux, Gilbert, Arizona, or attempted homicide, excuse me, October 2nd, 2019. The attempted shooting of Tammy Daybell, October 9th, 2019. The death of Tammy Daybell, October 19th, 2019.
Let me go with you on the second page.
November 1st, police received a call about a Jeep. The Jeep was located November 4th, 2019. Chad and Lori get married in Hawaii, November 5th, 2019. Welfare check on JJ, November 26th, 2019, which is the same day Alex and Chad were contacted. The Rexburg Police Department searched Lori and Alex's apartments November 27th, 2019. Search warrant served on the Daybell residence was June 9th on 2020. JJ and Tyler were taken to the Ada County Coroner's office June 10th, 2020. And the autopsy was conducted June 11th of 2020. Thank you.
Your Honor, I have no further questions for this witness at this time.
All right, thank you, Mr. Wood. Mr. Pryor, cross-examination.
Judge, would the court like me to start, or would you like to take a break, a lunch break?
Let's go ahead and get started with the cross and go till.
Well, Pryor basically asks for a recess, and the judge says, no, you can go ahead. Okay. So anyway, now we are going to deal with the cross-examination. Let's see how John Pryor does.
Good afternoon, all. Good morning, officer.
Good morning, sir.
We do know each other. We've at least exchanged pleasantries a couple of times.
Yes, sir.
And
Tamika.
I guess for purposes of this hearing, would you prefer that I refer to you as lieutenant or officer?
Lieutenant's fine.
Mr. Pryor, I apologize very much for the interruption. I wanted to confirm something on that last exhibit. It was entered by the court. Is that a demonstrative exhibit?
That's what I understand.
Either as a demonstrative or a summary.
Okay, thank you, counsel. Apologies for the.
So we can expect John Pryor to kind of undermine this witness, his experience, his.
So Lieutenant, you've been involved in a number of aspects in regards to this case, right?
That's correct.
You've done some investigation on your own in terms of welfare check with Lori Vallum, is that right?
Yes.
But you've also interviewed a number of witnesses, is that correct?
Yes.
You interviewed Melanie Gibb, David Warwick, right?
Yes.
Several times?
Few times.
And you've interviewed a number of other witnesses as it relates to this case, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, now you previously discussed your role as a police officer and investigator in this case. And I guess I want to clarify something if you could, please. As a police officer investigating a case, your role is to conduct an investigation, right? Look at the facts.
Correct.
Try to establish and gain some information, right?
Correct.
But you're not supposed to judge one way or the other, right? You're supposed to remain neutral.
That's correct.
And you're not supposed to narrow that role as a police officer to a particular person. Is that correct?
That's correct.
In other words, you're supposed to look at the evidence as a whole. And rather than focusing on one person and saying, we're going to assume this person did this, and we're going to build our case around prosecuting that person, that would be inappropriate, wouldn't it?
Correct.
Your role is actually to look at all the evidence, consider all the evidence. And once you've gathered all the evidence that you think is relevant to a case, what do you do with that evidence?
We follow the evidence.
Okay, and then once you follow the evidence, you've established a report or you've come to concluding your investigation, what do you do with that evidence that you've concluded with?
We put a case together.
Okay, and then do you provide it to someone?
We provide it to the prosecutors.
Okay, so there's distinct roles as part of a criminal case. You'd agree with that, right?
Yes.
And your role is to conduct an investigation, correct?
Correct.
Look into all possible evidence of any kind, correct?
That's correct.
And view the evidence, right?
Yes.
Not make any determination as to what that evidence means, but rather gather as much evidence as you think is relevant in your mind and put together a compilation of that evidence, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then at that point, only at that point, do you provide it to the prosecuting attorney and they make a determination as to whether or not they will pursue charges against them. Do you understand? Is that the way you understand the process is supposed to work?
Yes.
Okay. And if you were not to follow that process, if you were not to follow what I just described, that wouldn't be appropriate. There's protocols. You agree with that, right?
Yes.
Okay. And you should never blend the roles of a police officer with the role of a prosecuting attorney. You would agree with that, right?
Explain what you mean by blend the roles.
Well, I mean, it's not a prosecutor's role to show up at an investigation when you're conducting an investigation and engage in part of the process of an interviewing witnesses. You'd agree with that, right?
I've had prosecutors show up to certain investigations.
Okay, but that's not the norm, is it?
I think it depends on the investigation.
Okay. So in other words, you think that it's appropriate that if a prosecutor is deciding whether to pursue charges against somebody, that they should also participate in the interviewing of these witnesses as part of that process. Is that what you're telling me?
I think it's important for a prosecutor to have all the information.
Well, doesn't that create a problem in your mind?
No, sir.
Okay. Well, let me talk to you a little bit about that. Because if you're doing an investigation and you're really remaining neutral as part of that investigation, right? You're not supposed to make judgments, correct?
Correct.
You're supposed to look at the evidence, gather all the evidence, and then make a determination of what evidence you want to submit to a prosecuting attorney, right?
Correct.
Do you ever get involved in the process of deciding whether someone should be charged or not?
What do you mean by that, sir?
Well, after the evidence is all gathered, and after you've done your report as a police officer and put together all of the information, do you ever go over to the prosecutor's office and say, you know what, I put this evidence together, and you know what, I want to have a discussion with you about whether or not we want to charge this person? That wouldn't be appropriate, would it?
I'm going to object as argumentative.
It's the same.
Okay. But would it be appropriate for a prosecutor to interview witnesses and inject their personal opinion in those processes of interviewing witnesses? Would that be proper under any circumstances?
And I'm going to object as argumentative.
I'll overrule that objection.
And could you repeat the question again?
Yes. But would it be appropriate for a prosecutor to interview witnesses and inject their personal opinion in those processes of interviewing witnesses? Would that be proper under the circumstances?
To interject their personal opinion?
Yeah.
I would say probably not.
Okay. So if you're engaging in name calling or making references to a person's character in a case, that would clearly be an inappropriate act, would it not?
Objection beyond the scope, Your Honor.
That's sustained, and that's facts on it, evidence.
Right. Now, you spoke a little bit about this body cam issue. And you said that it was a policy that there's only one body cam among 7 or 10 of you as detectives. Is that right?
No, sir, I never once said it was policy. I just said there was only one body cam.
Oh, so,
Between 7 detectives.
so in other words, you share a body cam. It's not a policy within the department.
Correct.
Okay, is there a policy in the department about recording or trying to preserve a record when you're interviewing witnesses?
Yes.
Okay, and what's that policy, sir?
When we interview and conduct interviews at the police department.
Yeah.
Those interviews are recorded.
Okay. Now, what about if you're out in the field and you're conducting an interview? Is that to be recorded as well?
There's no policy that says it has to be recorded.
Okay. Do you carry a microphone as well, officer, other than a body cam?
No, not on my person, I don't.
Okay. Do you carry a cell phone while you're doing that? That's issued by the county.
Do I keep the cell phone in my car? Yes.
I didn't ask you that. I said, do you carry a cell phone when you go out in the field?
On my person or in my vehicle?
Either one.
In my vehicle.
Okay. And does that cell phone have the technology that allows you to record or photograph and videotape images?
Yes, it does.
Okay. So what I understand is on November 26, 2019, you were directed, or you directed your folks to go out to the Lori Vallow residence. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, and you said that you were with Ron Ball. Is that who you said you were with?
At one time, yes, I was with a couple different officers that day.
Oh, so tell me who you were with on that day. Remind me.
Detective Dave Holt,
Okay,
Detective David Stubbs,
okay.
and Lieutenant Ron Ball.
So there were 4 of you who went out there to locate or to find out some information about what again? Remind me.
About the whereabouts of J.J. Vallow.
Okay, and this was a concern that you had because you were contacted by another law enforcement agency expressing concern about the safety of a young child, right?
No, sir.
Okay, tell me what was the purpose?
It was a simple welfare check.
Okay. And you went out on this welfare check and there were, if my map is correct, please correct me. Did all 4 of you detectives and lieutenants go out at the same time?
No, sir.
You went out at different times.
Myself and Dave Hope went out initially.
Okay, and then when did the other 2 officers show up?
When I called them based on the lies that I had been told.
Okay. And these lies that you've been told, at that point, you and Detective Hope, neither of you decided to bring a video camera, right?
That's correct.
And neither of you decided to wear a recorder to record any of the incidents that took place about these so-called lies, right?
That's correct.
And nobody took out their phone and recorded it or made a video or audio recording of the discussion with Mr. Daybell or Mr. Cox on November 26, 2019, right?
That's correct.
And even after you said these so-called lies, even after you discovered that, Mr. Daybell apparently told you something that you didn't think was true, at that point, did you instruct any of the officers who were coming to aid you? Maybe it's a good idea we should bring an audio with, or a video camera with us, or a mic to record some of these statements, because I have some concerns. Did you think about that?
We did that, sir.
Hold on.
I'm going that there was an objection and sustaining the objection. So, strike the answer. You can ask another question, Mr. Pryor.
Objection
And it was,
sustained.
Detective Stubbs who had the video cam, is that right?
That's correct, sir.
And that was when you video cammed Miss Vallow, about when you had contact eventually with Miss Vallow, is that what the video camera that you're talking about?
I didn't have contact with Miss Vallow.
Now, I'm a little confused about something. And maybe you can clear this up. You said that, you asked Mr. Daybell first about whether he had Lori Vallow's phone number, correct?
No, sir, I didn't contact Mr. Daybell till after I contacted Alex Cox.
Okay. At some point, did you ask for Lori Vallow's phone number from Mr. Daybell?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And at no point did you ever make a threat to him saying you're going to turn this phone number over to us, right?
No, sir.
At no point did any other officer walk up to him and say, if you don't turn this phone number over, you're going to get yourself in a lot of trouble. That never took place to your knowledge, right?
That's correct.
Okay. But then after that, you're saying, at first he said, I'm not going to give you the phone number. And then out of the blue, he decides to give you the phone number.
Objection misstates the facts and evidence.
Okay. Then subsequent to that, he
Hold on,
decides,
Mr. Pryor. When there's an objection, I'm gonna rule on it.
Wow.
Launch into another question. So the objection is sustained.
subsequent to that, he decides to give you the phone number. Is that right?
Judge admonishing Pryor a little bit there. Okay.
I'll go back over the analysis.
Thank you.
Your testimony is that Mr. Daybell refused to give you the phone number at first, correct?
That's correct.
And that was an adamant refusal. He said, no, I don't know what her phone number is, right?
That's correct.
And then without any further prompting by the police officers or any encouragement by law enforcement, he shows back up and gives you the phone number later, right?
Objection is misstating the facts and the
Well,
evidence.
I'm trying to establish the facts, Judge.
The objection's overruled. If the witness has an answer, you may answer.
You say he showed back up. He never left when I originally asked him.
Okay,
I had to ask him twice to get the phone.
okay. And how much time passed between the first request and the second request?
Roughly a minute.
Okay. So without any prompting by the police, he asked him for the phone number. He denied, and then within 60 seconds, he said, oh, here's the phone number. Is that what your testimony is?
When Detective Hope started walking towards us and I re-asked him again, that's when he gave me the number.
So you had to ask him twice. Is that what you're saying?
That's correct.
Look how still Chad is sitting, looking at his attorney like it's
Now you,
dad.
I'm gonna kind of bounce around a little bit, okay? Please bear with me, okay? You made a
Chin is up.
comment about
This is my attorney asking for me.
And if I misquote your testimony, please correct me, okay? You said something about a supposed paintball gun incident with Tammy Daybell, right?
Yes.
Okay. And then you later on decided that it was the words you used were a shooting. Is that the words you used?
Probably.
Well, you were just here testifying a few minutes ago and just used the word shooting when Mr. Wood talked to you about that, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, as part of your investigation, you've had a chance to look at all the evidence, right? In this case, you've got access to almost all the evidence in this case,
That's
right?
correct.
And have you gone through all the evidence in this case?
Yes, I have.
Okay, and did you look at evidence of facts and circumstances surrounding the Tammy Daybell incident on October 9th?
Yes.
And Judge, just bear with me.
Your Honor, if he's going to be showing evidence digitally, can we put our screen back up?
Yeah.
I remember when we were in court, they turned the monitors to face the other way. I've also seen them in court put covers over the monitors.
Not sure I'm gonna be up there about. Okay. Now, I would represent to you that we previously stipulated to the admission of a number of exhibits in this case. And one of the exhibits is exhibit number 16. Okay? And the parties that previously exhibited, Judge, we've already moved it, it's already been exhibited. So what I'm gonna do is show you exhibit 16, okay?
And this is one already admitted.
It's already been admitted, Judge, previously. Now, you talked about, facts, and you used the word shooting is what you used, right? Tammy Daybell?
Correct.
And you don't believe that, Tammy Daybell was shot at with anything other than a paintball gun, do you?
Objection relevance.
Overruled.
You don't believe that Tammy Daybell was shot with anything other than a paintball gun, do you?
Yes, I do, sir.
Okay, and what do you base that on?
The evidence through our investigation.
Okay, and part of your investigation is did you look at the Tammy Daybell, evidence that she provided to your office?
To my office or Fremont County?
Fremont County.
I did.
Okay,
You see how Pryor is focusing on one thing that he can think of that sort of undermines the detective. One where he used the wrong word, where he couldn't remember the photographer in the room. It's very it's a very kind of anal way. It's not like holistic. It's like one thing. Oh, maybe I made a mistake. That's kind of how he's doing his cross-examination.
out loud, just to yourself.
Hi, Mel. Thanks for joining us.
Let me know when you're done.
I'm done, sir.
Okay. And I would represent to you that this is a email from Tammy Daybell to her friends in the Salem Third Ward of her church. Okay? And would you start with the word something and read the email to me?
Something really weird just happened. I want you to know so you can watch out. I'd gotten home and parked in our front driveway. As I was getting stuff out of the back seat, a guy wearing a ski mask suddenly standing at the back of my car with a paintball gun. He shot at me several times, although I don't think it was loaded. I yelled for Chad and he ran around the back of the house. I have no idea what his motive was, and he never spoke, even after I asked him several times what he though.
Okay. So, and do you see the date on this email? Just about friends there.
Remember, they
No,
found a
Jack,
mask in the garage.
I'll sustain that. Do you want to clarify, Mr. Pryor, what type of communication it is?
Well, it's a communication to the friends of the church, and I think it's a text
I'm
message.
sorry.
I can. I believe it's a text message. Judge, I may have misstated that it was an email.
Okay.
My apologies. So this text message went out to all of the friends of the Salem Third Ward. It's an LDS ward over in the town of Salem, right?
I can't answer
You
that.
don't know. You know where the town of Salem is, right?
I do.
And that's a town that's close to Rexburg?
Correct.
Okay. And obviously, you can't answer that about the ward or anything like that, but obviously the term ward would suggest that it's some sort of a religious group of folks they're talking to, right?
Correct.
Okay. But this email doesn't say that she was shot with a gun, or there's even a mention of a gun. The email talks about a paintball.
Again, I'm gonna object to characterization of this as an email. It needs to be
Text
sexual
message, judge, it's gonna be.
I'm sorry. We'll speak for it.
Yeah. When there's an objection, Mr. Pryor, again, gotta have time to get it on the record.
Well,
And then respond, please. So,
Pryor being admonished for the second time in
Text.
10 minutes.
I'm also gonna
By the
object that it's
judge.
being described as a text message. There needs to be some foundation for what this evidence actually is.
Judge, I don't need a foundation. This has been admitted as an exhibit. This is
All right.
it.
I'll overrule that objection. Jury can do it in the format it came in with the screen capture.
So at any rate, this message from Ms. Daybell to the people in the Third Ward doesn't say that it was a gun, does it?
Says, does say it's a gun, just says it's a paintball gun.
Oh, it says it's a paintball gun. You're right. Okay.
Yes, sir.
It doesn't say any other gun, right? That there's any confusion about it, right?
I think Tammy
This
thought it was a
email or
paintball gun,
text.
Okay.
Do you think
Did
it was
you
a
also
paintball
have an
gun?
occasion to look at the
Yes, Earth,
reading
that did seem to be Alex shooting
search
at
engine
Tammy.
for
Maybe
Daybell's account?
the gun jammed.
No, I did not look at the search engine for Tammy.
Were you aware that, and I'm gonna hack his name, but one of the officers, Officer K, whatever his name is, Officer K, was provided email, search information that Tammy Daybell engaged in regarding paintball guns in a picture. Were you aware of that?
Objection calls for speculation.
I'm asking whether he's aware of it.
Overruled.
Are you aware of it?
I was aware that he was provided information. I can't tell you exactly what information he was.
Okay, we'll get to that in another day. But did you also listen to the 911 call that was made regarding the paintball incident?
I did.
Okay, and there was no mention of a gun in that 911, right?
No,
The mention in the 911 call is that someone took a shot at me or tried to take a shot with a paintball gun, right?
that's correct.
Okay, so the suggestion today that it was a gun is based on your own hunch, right?
No, sir.
Well, do you have the gun?
I have evidence of Google searches
Well
done by
said.
Alex Cox around that time.
Okay. Do you have information as to where Alex Cox was at the time of this alleged shooting?
Yes, sir.
You do have evidence of that?
He was at the Daybell residence earlier that day.
I didn't ask you on the day of the Daybell residence, at the time of this shooting.
Listen
Did
to
you call in
his
a
voice
shooting,
going
please?
up. I didn't ask you about that.
Maybe 8 in the evening, maybe.
Right, and let's clarify this, because the data that you have regarding him being at the residence was much earlier in the day, right?
That's correct.
And you don't have any data that shows that Alex Cox's phone dinged or any other communication device that Alex Cox had was at the location of the house at the time of this paintball incident, do you?
At the time, no, sir.
Okay. And so at this point, the information you're talking about is, there's some Google searches by Alex Cox, correct?
That's correct.
And the information is that you've decided to not take into consideration Tammy Daybell's own statement about a paintball gun?
Objection misstates his testimony.
Sustained.
So what other information are you leaning on to suggest that this was anything but a paintball gun?
The Google searches performed by Alex Cox talked about shooting through Dodge Dakota.
Okay. And I appreciate that. And that would be one of Chad and Tammy Daybell's vehicles. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Were you aware of who was driving the Dodge Dakota at the time that incident took place?
No, sir.
Okay. Did you talk to any of the family members, any of the 4 children about who was actually the driver of this Dodge Dakota that Alex Cox was trying to figure out a way to shoot through?
We attempted to contact those children and they wouldn't speak with us.
Okay, so you don't know whether Chad Daybell or Tammy Daybell were driving that Dodge Dakota, right?
That's correct.
So the reality is that Tammy Daybell was driving the Dodge Dakota. It sounds like Alex Cox had something for Tammy Daybell. Is that what you're suggesting?
I'm not suggesting that. I'm just simply stating what Mr. Cox's Google searches were around the time of that shooting.
Okay, and you're basing those Google searches on your position that you believe this was a shooting, right?
That's correct.
Okay, so if Chad Daybell was driving the Dodge Dakota during this time, and he was the primary driver and maybe the only driver, would that mean then you would be looking at whether Alex Cox was trying to shoot Chad Daybell?
Chad Daybell didn't call in a 911 call and said he was shot at. Tammy Daybell.
Yeah, but Tammy Daybell called in a 911 call about a paintball gun. And it was a paintball gun. And we'll have Officer Cannon talk about that. And we'll listen to the 911 call.
Objection, that's not a question.
Well, the question is,
Mr. Pryor, again, you've got to give me an opportunity to rule an objection. If it is sustained, let's just argue it's not a question. You can ask another question.
the shooting and the call that was taking place was in reference to a paintball gun incident, wasn't it?
Can you repeat the question, sir? I couldn't hear you.
The call that was made regarding this incident was a 911 call about a paintball incident, wasn't it? They used the words paintball in the 911 call.
That's correct.
We'll move on. Okay. Now, we previously talked about, and Judge, I don't know when you want to stop. I've got a ways to go.
I think this probably is a good time for the lunch break, given the time. So we will take our lunch recess. That will be an hour. We'll plan on coming back on for additional testimony around 10:15 after 1.
All rise, please.
Okay, we're on recess. Okay, so court unfortunately won't be resuming shortly on this channel. I'm only doing the morning session for a couple of reasons. My voice took a beating yesterday. You must remember, I not only do the live stream, I've got to do another video, and then I've also got to do an audio book recording as well. And my voice just can't handle all of that. So I'm not a machine. I'd like to be a machine, but I'm not a machine. So I'm only going to be covering the morning session. I generally don't like covering the defense case unless it's a very good defense attorney and there's a strong defense case anyway. But for a couple of reasons, I'm not going to be doing that. I'm working on the Amanda Knox deep dive, so look out for that later today. I'm also going to be trying to put up chapter 11 of The Day After Christmas, so that's what my voice is going to be doing. So remember, there's no trial day tomorrow, so I might be back on Monday, or if not, then I'll be back covering the Karen Reed case. If I don't cover the Daybell trial for 1 or 2 days, that doesn't mean I've stopped. I might cover certain parts of it either live or, how can I put it, sort of later the days. I might like review the trial coverage. I remember I'm going to America in about 2 weeks, so I've kind of got things I need to do. I need to go to the dentist, for example. I need to do all sorts of things. So I kind of I can't just spend the whole day doing this. I also need to do some other things. Thanks a lot, guys, for being here, though. I really appreciate it. Still was quite a long day, 3.5 hours. Chelsea, thanks a lot for being here. Please do look out for a video I'm putting up on Amanda Knox's 4-page letter. If you haven't read the original, letter, which I put up yesterday, please do read that. I'm probably going to end up doing like 5 videos just on that particular aspect. I've actually written 6 books on the Amanda Knox case. Somebody asked me, wow, 6 books, why did you write 6 books? And I actually said, I actually meant to write another 2, the Ivorian and the Denouement. I designed the covers and never really got around to doing that. So I actually feel like I've unfinished business with the Amanda Knox case. That's one of the cases that really makes me the most upset of all the cases I've covered, that particular case. So I'll be dealing with that. I'm also going to try and get a little bit of exercise tonight. Had very little time last night, so that's also what this is about. Okay. Again, thanks a lot for being here. Diana says, am I going to Boise? I don't plan on it. I don't plan on going to Boise. I have to say that I like Boise. It's a place I wouldn't mind living. In fact, my plan for this trip to America was to stay on the East Coast. I've been saying that for such a long time. I only want to stay on one coast because it gets expensive going like that. but I've just spoken to somebody, and it looks like I might be going to Lake Tahoe. Am I saying it right? So I might be going sort of to California. And if I'm in California, I'm just down the road in a way from Idaho. I've also always wanted to see that forest, the world's biggest organism, which is in Utah. So I might end up doing that. I'm just really a little bit stretched this time. On my previous trips to America, I was in quite a solid position. This time, because I've gone to Namibia, I went to the coast as well a few days ago. That did definitely impact my savings. So yeah, I did get a good flight price with Virgin Airlines to America, but yeah, it's long haul flights certainly don't come cheap. I really would have liked to have stayed on here longer just to get debriefing from Kat Kruger, and show her the little toy that she gave me to give to Timmy. But I guess we'll have to do that some other time. We do need to have a conference. So I don't know. We must decide where most of you are. So I don't know, maybe tomorrow or whenever I go live again, I'll probably do a live stream and poll asking where most of you guys in chat are. Are you those of you who are in America, are you East Coast, West Coast, North, South? And then I suppose we could have one or two conferences somewhere around there. Maybe a book signing. I'm always surprised when I hear that someone has read. Someone actually told me they've read every single one of my Amanda Knox books. I always find that very encouraging. If you read one book and stop there, that's discouraging. But if you end up reading every single book, then I've obviously achieved what I set out to achieve, which is to counter the narrative that exists. So yeah. Pauline Buckles, we on a recess, but I'm also not going to be coming back after the lunch break. Just is there anyone here that doesn't know me and hasn't read any of my books? Anyone here? Anyone? Don't be shy. Put up your hands. If there is, these are my books on Amazon. You can see I've written about quite a few subjects. Neverest, I see I've just gotten another review there. John Benet Ramsey, Casey Anthony. Oh, okay, you guys can't see that. The Everest Saga, 1996. John Benet Ramsey, Casey Anthony. West Memphis 3. I've got quite a lot of series out there. Chris Watts, 14 books or something like that. No, it's not 14. I think it's 9 plus 3. Around about 11 or 12 books on Chris Watts, Gannon Stork, and the list goes on. So if you new to this channel and you want to look at what I've done quite a lot. So check it out. Iceland says you do you best. Okay. I have actually met a couple of people in the True Crime Rocket Science community. I've met Stephanie and her husband. That's Stephanie from Connecticut. I've met someone else who I think wants to stay anonymous in Manhattan, and her partner. I've also met Susan Kovalinsky, also in New York. I've met just there's so many people who want to remain anonymous, but folks in South Carolina, Laurie and Morgan, I've met people in Boulder. I actually traveled with someone from Boulder to attend the trial in Texas. I've also met, who am I missing? Terry Dean. Obviously, I've met Iceland in Oregon as well. So I think I've already met around about 10, maybe a dozen of the members of the True Crime Rocket Science community in person. So you can ask them what that was like, and hopefully we can do something like that again in future. In terms of the poll, let's have a look. Money has gone down to 37%, 36%. So now money is around about a third. Power is 24%, sex 21%, religion 19%. I tend to agree with those numbers that each one of those four aspects is a very important part of the influence on this case. I think if you had to ask me, I would say the bottom line influence here is power, that both Chad and Laurie were looking for power. That's my personal opinion, and that money, sex, and religion were three different ways of getting power, right? If you think about this case, it's all about the end of the world and I'm God's messenger. This is all about a claim to power. It's also about a man who seems to think that he's gained sexual power when I'm not sure if he really did. It's also about a woman's sexual power, but I think at the end of the day, it is about fairly powerless, helpless people trying to use nefarious means to increase their power. So that would be my answer. But I like the fact that each one of these four have gotten the amount of votes that they have, because it shows you it's not just, even if you say it is power, it's not just power. Money, sex, and religion each played varying roles. I would say that sex played quite a big role in Chad's psychology, probably more than Laurie's. Like Laurie used sex, Chad was kind of, his brain was addled by it, kind of thing. So if sex was Laurie's weapon, religion was Chad's weapon. What weapon did neither of them have? What resource did neither of them have? Money. And they abused power and they borrowed strength in order to gain things in a way that I think is not, it's like kind of a cheating way. Okay, so I think I'm going to end there. I hope you found this session interesting. I hope I've expanded your minds and taken you down a couple of corridors that you might not otherwise have gone down. I still do want to complete that timeline that I put out, so I will do that in the next live stream. And of course, the timeline going from August, September on is very important, so look out for that. Yeah, that is quite funny. I see Liesl McGuire is here. Liesl's a lawyer. Any comments on John Pryor observations? Any comments on what Rob Wood has done so far? Any comments on the judge in this case? Liesl says, I've been listening while I work. Okay. Hope I'm not putting you on the spot, Liesl. We've got another novelist in chat by the looks of it. Elizabeth says, I know you from your channel, but not from your books. So I do want to recommend that you check out my Amazon page. Please do if you haven't already. So I'll put the link in there again. Thank you, Maria, Lois, Pauline. Anyway, Liesl, maybe you can take a couple of notes and share them with us when I'm on the next time. I also want to get another debrief from Kat Kruger. Oh, so I've also met Kat Kruger in Boise. So yeah, I've definitely met around about a dozen folks from the true crime rocket science community in person. Let's see if we can get that to double that on the next visit. Thanks a lot for that. Appreciate it. So please remind me if I forget that we need to poll you guys, see where you folks in chat, most of you are. I'd obviously prefer to meet those of you who take an active interest in this channel on a daily basis than kind of a random subscriber who, you know what I mean? The folks who are true fans. Let's you know, you want to have a authentic meeting with true fans. So that's really what we have in mind. Okay, so Liesel says, I think John Pryor is doing his best to defend his awful client. Yeah, I mean, he's trying to do something with the cards he's been dealt. I always knew he would have to turn on Laurie. It's his only path forward. I will share more with you in an email. Okay, sounds good. I have been to San Diego, by the way. I have been to San Diego. Went to Coronado, that island. Led Ketchers, I'm a true fan, but in Canada. There are actually quite a few fans from Canada. Okay, anything else? Okay, that's it from me. I'm going to bid you guys adieu. Again, just a reminder, I'm not going to be back for the lunch, after the lunch break. I might be covering the Karen Reed trial, but otherwise look out for my next analysis of the Amanda Knox letter. Take care, guys. I'll see you guys next time.